All right, today we're diving into a pretty provocative article, one that takes a hard look at the welcome to country rituals we see all across Australia. We're going to break down the author's arguments step by step to really understand why they claim this practice, which is meant to bring people together, might actually be doing the opposite. So, let's get right into it.
So to build their case, the author starts in a really unexpected place, not with politics or history, but with a story. It's this powerful analogy about a relationship that's completely fallen apart, and it's designed to frame their whole critique of forced symbolic gestures.
So here's the story in a nutshell. You've got a husband who finds out his wife has been unfaithful. As you can imagine, trust is just gone. There are fights, accusations, the relationship is fundamentally broken. The author's point is, the damage has been done. But the real question is, can it be fixed?
Well, a marriage counselor comes in with a proposed solution, a mandatory daily ritual. Every single night, no matter what, the wife has to greet her husband at the door with a kiss. The idea is that this gesture will show respect and start to heal his wounded pride. And this, right here, is the absolute heart of the story. The author poses the question, can a forced gesture, an act that's commanded rather than felt, actually heal what's broken? Or is it just going to become a bitter daily reminder of the betrayal, making the resentment even worse?
Okay, so now let's bridge the gap. Let's see exactly how the author connects this deeply personal story to their core argument against welcome to country ceremonies. The author really doesn't mince words. They lay out their position very clearly. They argue that this ritual isn't some ancient unifying tradition. Instead, they see it as a modern political tool that, in their view, actively creates more division, keeps grievances alive, and ultimately doesn't deliver any real benefits. Now, the author is careful to say that this isn't coming from a place of disrespect or hostility. They frame it as a principled position, one that's grounded in a belief that all men are equal before God. And from that starting point, they conclude that the ritual is actually doing more harm than good.
So the first pillar of this critique really goes after the ritual's origin story. The author's main claim here is that what we see today is a pretty modern invention, not some timeless, ancient tradition.
And this comparison gets right to the point. On one side, you have the way it's commonly presented, as this ancient custom that goes back forever. But on the other side, you have the author's claim that it's actually a modern protocol, something that was really only formalized in the last few decades. To back this up, the author argues that the ritual's authority comes from this misleading sense of ancientness. They also make the point that it isn't even universally supported within Indigenous communities themselves, and that this diversity of opinion often gets completely ignored in the public conversation. This all leads the author to ask a pretty blunt question. Okay, if this ritual is the answer, what exactly is the problem it's supposed to be solving? They're shifting here from history to effectiveness, and they want to see some tangible proof. And from the author's perspective, this is the bottom line: a lack of results. They argue that even though the ritual is everywhere now, there's just no credible evidence to suggest it's actually led to any real improvements in critical areas like health, education, or even in genuinely advancing reconciliation. The critique then goes even deeper. The author starts to explore what they see as the hidden, unseen consequences of the ritual, arguing that it might actually create an incentive to keep division alive. To explain this, the author brings in a concept from organizational theory called the Shirky principle. The basic idea is that sometimes an institution that's created to solve a problem can, over time, become invested in that problem never fully going away. Why? Because its own survival and relevance depend on it. The author sees this principle playing out perfectly in the dynamic of the ritual. It sets up a permanent relationship. One group is always doing the welcoming, and the other is always being welcomed. In their view, this doesn't lead to equality. It locks in a kind of moral imbalance, where some are always the custodians and everyone else is just a guest in their own country. So the subtle message here, according to the author, is that for non-Indigenous Australians, your sense of belonging is conditional. It depends on you accepting a kind of inherited guilt for things that happened in the past, and this whole idea of hereditary responsibility is something the author flatly rejects. And finally, the author talks about something they call ritual fatigue. You know that feeling when you hear something so many times it just becomes background noise? They argue that when the practice is repeated at every board meeting, every school assembly, the words lose their meaning. It's no longer a moment of reflection, it's just a reflex. It ends up promoting compliance, not genuine respect, and just like that forced kiss in the story, it can actually end up breeding resentment. But, this isn't just about tearing something down. The author also proposes an alternative,
what they see as a more genuine and effective path toward national unity.
Their proposed path looks very different. It's all about shifting the focus away from symbols and toward practical action. They advocate for things like focusing on equal citizenship for everyone, building a shared identity, and delivering real solutions to real problems. At its core, the idea is to focus on the here and now, not on constantly relitigating the past.
And this quote just brings the entire argument full circle, right back to that story of the married couple. The author's core belief is simple. You can't command respect with a ritual, just like you can't command love. It has to be earned. And, most importantly, for it to last, it has to go both ways.
So at the end of the day, the author's conclusion is completely unambiguous. From their point of view, the welcome to country ritual, as it currently exists, isn't helping reconciliation. It's actually an obstacle in the way. And their final take is that it should be scrapped entirely to make room for something better.
And that leaves us with the big, provocative question at the very heart of this critique. The author argues that this particular form of symbolism has failed. So, if they're right, what's the real path forward? That's the challenge their argument puts on the table.